Hello everyone, this is Pooka and welcome to another Pokemon TCG deck. Today we have probably one of the most annoying decks in the world. But hey, let's take a look at it, because it can be fun if you're the one playing it. This is going to revolve around hand disruption and controlling your opponent's top decks, which is kind of what we like to call a lock deck, but it can be difficult to pull off sometimes, so it's not an extremely broken deck by any means, but hey, if you put your opponent in a bad spot, you can definitely win just about every time. So our deck is going to revolve around a few simple things. The first one is going to be Malamar. So Malamar has the attack Mental Trash. Your opponent flips 4 coins, and for each tails, he or she discards a card from his or her hand. So alright, we run Malamar plus red card. Your opponent shuffles his or her hand into his or her deck and draws 4 cards. So obviously, they go down to 4 cards, and then we can use Mental Trash to discard a bunch of those cards. Your opponent does get to choose which ones to discard, though. So when we use red card, we also want to play Getsis. Your opponent reveals his or her hand, and then we get to shuffle in all item cards we find there. Usually there's 1 or 2 item cards in that hand when we use red card. That's the goal. We want to get 1 or 2 back into the deck, leave our opponent with a 1 or 2 card hand, and then use Mental Trash to discard the whole thing. So that's the combo here. The alternative would be to use Hooligan's Gym and Gas instead of Getsis, as that is a coin flip, but Getsis seems a little bit more reliable. It is a risk since they might not have any items in their hand, but hey, we'll take that risk with this deck. So from there, after we kind of demolish our opponent's hand, we get to control what they draw with Trick Shovel. Look at the top card of either player's deck, and then you may discard that card or return it to the top of the deck. This is extremely annoying. Basically, every turn you just play a Trick Shovel, look at your opponent's top card. If it's something good, you discard it. If it's something worthless, you let him keep it. This way we get to control exactly what our opponent has. We get to know what our opponent has at all times because we've looked at our opponent's hand with Getsis, and we looked at the top card of our opponent's deck, so we know exactly what our opponent is working with at all times, and that is extremely powerful. After you've started to disrupt your opponent's hand and started to look at your opponent's top card with Trick Shovel, we have Sableye to junk hunt for them over and over and over. So every turn, we get to just see, is this a good card? Alright, discard it. Is it a bad card? Alright, keep it. And then we junk hunt for more Trick Shovels, and that's about it. While we're using those Trick Shovels, we build up damage with Hypnotoxic Laser, poisons our opponent's Pokemon, potentially puts them to sleep, but the poison is the important part. That combined with Verbank City Gym puts 3 damage counters on in between every turn, and that adds up pretty quickly when your opponent's not really doing anything. So this deck is just meant to be absolutely annoying. And it does a pretty good job at it. I'm not sure exactly how competitive this deck is, but the fact is, it can lock down every deck. That's pretty cool. Alright, so other Pokemon we have 1 Darkrai EX, just to give free retreat, and it can also be an attacker sometimes. Night Spear isn't too bad. 1 Victini for Victory Star. It can allow you to reflip for Malamar's Mental Trash. Even though it does say your opponent flips the coins, there was a mistranslation on Victini, so you can actually use Victory Star to reflip for Malamar. That's an official ruling. So that does work. It's strange, but it does work. You get 2 shots at Mental Trash. It's pretty cool. Then we have 1 Jirachi EX for Stellar Guidance, since we just can search for it and grab a supporter card. It works out pretty well. We can grab any one of our supporter cards. Like we've already looked at Getsis. We could grab Lysander. We could grab N. We only play 1 N in this deck since we don't want to give our opponent a new hand. Sometimes it's good though if they manage to take a couple prizes before we managed to mess with them. 4 Professor Juniper is pretty standard. 2 Skyla to just search out whatever we want. And then 1 Team Flare Grunt. Discard an energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon. Just adds to the absolute annoyance of this deck. Speaking of annoyance, we also have 3 Crushing Hammer. Flip a coin. If heads, discard an energy attached to one of your opponent's Pokemon. And then 1 Enhanced Hammer. discard a special energy. This deck is basically whittle away their hand with Malamar, and let Sableye abuse all the absolutely broken item cards that exist in the Pokemon TCG. He can recover them over and over and over and over until your opponent runs out of stuff and you win. It's a very slow process, but it is very effective. Other cards we have in the deck, we have 3 Bicycle, just an item-based draw card. 3 Ultra Ball, pretty simple, discard 2, search for a Pokemon. A Level Ball can search for most of the deck. We've looked at Red card already. We have a Professor's Letter to just search out some basic energy. An Escape Rope, just to have a switching card in here, and it can put your opponent in an awkward situation, forcing out a Pokemon that they don't want to. And then 2 Dark Patch, just to recover some of those darkness energy. We don't need too many of these since we're just attacking with Sableye most of the time, but it is nice to be able to just recover those energy out of the discard pile. Then we have a Startling Megaphone, discard all Pokemon tools attached to each of your opponent's Pokemon, and a Super Rod, shuffle in 3 Pokemon and basic energy. And then finally, the Ace Spec card is Dowsing Machine. This allows us to recover any trainer card, which is very nice. You discard 2 cards, get a trainer from the discard pile into your hand. So we can get any supporter. More importantly, we can get a stadium that helps with Burbank City Gym sometimes, and also any of the item cards we want. So Dowsing Machine is incredible in this deck, especially when you can junk hunt for it. So this is what I like to think of as the most annoying deck in existence. Sableye, Malamar, Trick Shovel. And we'll get to see this bad boy in action. It doesn't always work out. You can get overpowered sometimes, but when it works, you know you're going to win. So let's take a look at a game that I played with this deck. And it looks like I am going first, which is going to be pretty nice. That allows us to get Malamar out pretty quickly. And I am starting with Darkrai. Not the worst thing in the world. We should be able to get an energy on him and then hopefully get a Malamar on the second turn and retreat. So we start off by top decking a red card. That's pretty big. Right away, my opponent starts off with 4 cards instead of the 6 or 7 he had, because I actually did mulligan there. We're going to go with a Trick Shovel to see what he's going to draw, and it's a Pikachu. You can keep a Pikachu. If it was a supporter, I would have discarded it. But it's a Pikachu, and I don't really mind if my opponent has a Pikachu. I'm just worried about, does my opponent have supporter cards? And I don't know. I don't know what those 4 cards are, but I'm going to hope that the answer is no. I get a Sableye and then a Darkness Energy. Going to go ahead and attach that to Darkrai, and then probably just pass the turn. My opponent has a Keldeo EX and a Pikachu. I'm going to assume, I don't actually know what this deck would be then. Maybe some kind of Eviltal deck. Oh, hey, there's an Eviltal. And then the Pikachu comes down as well. And we'll see what else we can do here. And energy goes on to the Eviltal, and oh man, my opponent just passes without playing a supporter. Wow. So I'm going to go ahead and Ultra Ball here. We're going to grab Malamar to try to finish off my opponent's hand here and try to get the lock going with some Trick Shovels. So we got Trick Shovel, and then going to go for the Laser Verbank. And Trick Shovel. Let's look at my opponent's deck and see what we got. A double colorless energy. Now that's weird. That does allow Keldeo EX to retreat. So I suppose, or it could allow a Raichu to attack. But I don't know. It doesn't really get my opponent anywhere. It doesn't get my opponent a prize. That's the big thing. You want to deny prizes and you want to deny supporters when you're using Trick Shovel. And so I'll let my opponent keep that card. It's not a supporter. And here we go. Going for the Mental Trash. Try to discard the rest of my opponent's... What? 4 heads? 4 heads? No. Well, that is the downside of Malamar. I suppose you can flip 4 heads. It only discards cards for tails. Kind of not intuitive. Usually heads is the good thing. But since your opponent is flipping, tails is the good thing here. Oh well. I'm going to go ahead with the Getsis here. See if my opponent has anything worthwhile. And there is a Dark Patch in there. So I'll go ahead and get one of those cards. And we see my opponent really doesn't have anything. And we'll continue trying to use Mental Trash. We'll go for it, and alright, 2 tails this time, so the DCE and the Lysander both get discarded. My opponent could top deck here, though. I don't know what this card is, and that's very nerve-wracking. If this is a supporter, all of my work is undone, but I could just try to find another red card and then Mental Trash again. Oh, it's a Bouffalant. My opponent is left with 0 cards, and this is the opening that this deck can take advantage of. Wow, that Keldeo is very lazy. Staying asleep again. I'm going to go ahead and Juniper. And we got a Trick Shovel and a Darkness Energy. From here, the game is basically over. That might be weird to say. It might be weird to think. But we control everything that happens from here on out. And my opponent can do nothing about it. They have no Pokemon that can do anything. I control their top decks. The only way my opponent can find a way out at this point is if there are 3 or 4 supporter cards in a row, or a bicycle or something like that. And that's just extremely unlikely. And at that point, if that happens, my opponent is probably just so far behind that it doesn't matter. So the Keldeo EX gets knocked out by poison. I just junk hunted for 2 Trick Shovels. That way, if there are 2 supporter cards in a row, I can just go ahead and discard them both. We'll go ahead and use Trick Shovel. We see an Yveltal EX. Don't care if my opponent has another Pokemon. That's fine. I know my opponent's 1 card is an Ultra Ball. That's not a big deal. And then we'll go ahead and attach another energy to Darkrai, and we can start building up for a Night Spear pretty soon to just speed up the process of winning. And we get another turn to Junk Hunt here. I'm going to grab a Hypnotoxic Laser just so I can keep doing damage, and then another Trick Shovel. So Trick Shovel is an awesome card. It's a very evil card with Sableye, where we can control exactly what my opponent is doing. Now, one thing I am worried about is my opponent does have an Ultra Ball and an Yveltal EX. So if my opponent plays Jirachi EX, that could actually turn out to be a bad thing. I mean, they could just Ultra Ball for a Jirachi, but my opponent puts down an Yveltal EX, so I'm going to assume that, nope, there's no Jirachi in that deck. That is one big weakness of this deck. Trick Shovel, and nope, get rid of that. Trick Shovel and Yveltal EX, keep that one, I don't care. But yeah, Jirachi EX, it just gives my opponent more options to draw. It makes a harmless card like Ultra Ball turn into a supporter, so that's fairly annoying. But looks like we're in no danger here. Just going to Junk Hunt for a couple more Trick Shovels, and anything my opponent draws will be discarded if it happens to be good. We also have Dowsing Machine in hand as well. We don't have to worry about my opponent playing any disruption cards like N or anything. We know the 2 cards are Ultra Ball and Yveltal EX. So as long as you just keep tabs on what your opponent has, this is almost unbeatable. I'm going to go ahead and Trick Shovel once again, I suppose. Look at the opponent's deck. See Darkness Energy. Don't really care. You can have that all day. And I'm just going to Junk Hunt again. And that'll be that. Actually, you know, we can speed up this process now, I suppose. We're in a spot where I am in a pretty darn good position. So I'm actually just going to Night Spear, knowing that my opponent's cards are Ultra Ball and it'll be a Darkness Energy this turn. I don't really care about that too much. And if I can just Night Spear away, that'll be all I need to do. And my opponent just concedes the game, seeing the writing on the wall. At this point, you can afford to just be aggressive. I still have Trick Shovels to work with. And this, like I said, is going to be one of the most annoying decks of all time. Sableye, Trick Shovel, Malamar. Oh, the horror. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I will certainly have some more for you soon. I am Pooka from the Top Cut, and I'll see you guys next time.